Ready, sir.
The Havre de Grace Planning Commission meeting for September 28th, 2020 will now come to order. I'll begin by calling the roll. Chairman Ford is present. Mr. Miller?
Here. One of them.
Ms. Shaw?
I'm here.
And Mr. Miller?
Here.
Dr. Russell and Mr. Hartenstein and Councilman Renziker and our alternate, Mrs. Ware, are absent tonight, but with 4 present, we do have a quorum and can do business. The first case before us tonight is building permit number 2021-0088. It's brought by the applicant, Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. It is seek a variance to install an 80-foot communications tower off of Juniata Street, and our maximum allowed height for communications towers is 60 feet, and that's why the variance is required. So we've received a staff report from the Department of Planning. Mr. Grimm, do you have anything you want to say or anything you want to excerpt out of the staff report for the record?
Sure, Mr. Ford. I will briefly go over my staff report with you. And as you noted, this is for the construction of an 80-foot communications monopole at the Juniata Street substation. And the variance is requested from Section 205-9A, Table 1 of the City Code. And of course, it requires review and comment by the Planning Commission, and then the Board of Appeals will then hear the case. The property is located within the Old Town area of the city, as shown on the comprehensive plan. It is not located within the National Register Historic District, and it is defined as employment industrial in the land use plan. So the general uses in the area are consistent with the land use plan and the comprehensive plan. As you know, this area of the city is predominantly industrial with some residential surrounding those areas, particularly the Evonik location, which is adjacent to this site and also on the other side of Juniata from this site. The subject property is approximately 0.92 plus or minus acres and is improved, like I said, with the substation and other equipment associated with the BG&E substation. There is a tributary known as Lily Run, which bisects the property, and there are environmentally sensitive areas likely adjacent to the stream. However, this proposal will not impact the floodplain or any non-tidal wetlands that may be on the property. This topography of the subject property is generally flat in this area as well. I've enclosed a few maps for your review. We've reviewed the application in accordance with applicable code sections, and we find that the literal enforcement of the ordinance would cause a practical difficulty or unreasonable hardship. The proposed monopole is 80 feet, and there are several structures adjacent to the property that are 80 feet or greater, particularly the silos from Evonik, and also the light poles that are a part of the school's recreational facilities. So there would be no greater impact at this location in the district than there would be at another location. Arguably, there would be greater impact if this was located somewhere else in the commercial district. Therefore, the department recommends approval of the requested variance, and it is a much-needed upgrade to the system that will improve restoring power to customers throughout the service area and will contribute to greater reliability for BG&E customers, especially in the city of Havre de Grace. One thing I will note, I do appreciate Commission Member Miller letting me know that there were some issues with contamination on the property that were brought up previously. I did speak with Ms. Bussey, representative for the attorney for BG&E, and let her know that they should do their due diligence before doing any groundbreaking to contact MDE and any applicable reviewing agencies to ensure that there's no concerns there about their approach. Certainly with what they're proposing to do with the monopole, it's a very, very small limit of disturbance area for a foundation that will hold that structure. So with that, the department, again, has no objection to the variance, and we recommend the variance subject to the applicant obtaining all applicable permits for the construction of the monopole. And that's all I have at this time, Mr. Ford. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grimm. Now, I'll turn to the, first of all, commissioners, do you have any questions, Mr. Grimm? No?
I'm good.
Okay. Whoever would like to speak on behalf of the applicant, and I see one speaker standing at the podium. If more than one person wishes to speak, that's fine. We can take turns at your discretion. But just come up to the podium to speak, and we would like for you to start by giving your name and either your business or home address, whatever you prefer. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. If it would work for you all, could I stay here as the attorney and have the witnesses sit there and take turn? Okay, thank you. Jennifer Bussey, Whiteford, Taylor, and Preston, here on behalf of the applicant. Thank you very much for having us tonight. And I'd just like to say thank you. Obviously, the staff report was very accurate and very thorough, and it's been a pleasure to work with this jurisdiction. So thank you very much. We do have 3 witnesses that I'd like to have speak tonight. The first one, Mr. Newman, is here on behalf of Baltimore Gas and Electric. He can explain why we're here. Then, very briefly, Mr. Whitley prepared the photo simulation that I thought would be helpful for you all to see. And then lastly, Mr. Dyer prepared the plan that's in for approval, and he'll speak to the actual variance itself. Okay, great. So with that, should I go ahead and call then the first
Yes, and
witness?
just, you may introduce them, or they may introduce themselves. Go
Okay,
ahead.
great.
And please, when you come up to the table, pull the mic close to you. You want to get it really close so that we can, for the record, we can get everything. Thank you.
I do have a resume for Mr. Newman. Would you like me to, I have copies for everybody. Would you like me to provide that to you?
That's not necessary.
Okay.
Yeah,
Then I'll
yeah.
just go ahead and let Mr. Newman explain
Sure.
who he is and what he does for the company.
Very good.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Good evening.
Good.
My name is Jeremiah Newman, and I am a principal PM for BGE, and I work out of the Baltimore office. I live in Silver Spring, and my home address is 14503 Hempstead Way, Laurel, Maryland.
Great. Jeremiah, if you would, go ahead and explain why we're here. What is it that BGE is seeking to do in the area?
Right. So before I answer that question, I would like to sort of set the tone and explain what the BGE distribution automation system is. So the BGE automation distribution system is a network that comprises of digital sensors, switches, and devices that communicate within the network. And this communication is possible by way of what we call a radio. And via this communication, BGE has the ability to control, to monitor, as well as to improve the grid itself. So the way it works is the radios that I mentioned, which are embedded in the devices that exist within the network, those radios take the information from the field, which we call that information a BGE SCADA, takes that information and transfers that information back to the BGE service. But in order for the radios to transmit that data, it has to go through a system that digests and breaks down that communication into data points that the BGE service can understand. And this is why we need that pole, because that pole provides what we deem as a head-end station that allows that takes the information from the endpoint devices, which we also call radios, and sends it back to the BGE servers. So this is, in a nutshell, the basic operation of how the network works. As to why we're here today, for 2 reasons. The first reason being that the radios that currently exist within the devices that I alluded to that exist within the network, those radios will be unsupported, and they're unsupported by the vendor that makes them, therefore making those radios obsolete. The vendor will stop supporting those legacy radios within the next 6 months or so. So therefore, it's imperative that we either transition the network to a network that is more robust and allows BGE to certainly be able to control outages as well as shorten the duration of it. The second reason here is that the improved network, which we call the iTrend system, will give BGE the ability to pinpoint a fault when it occurs. And what that means is BGE will be able to deploy crews faster, which will, 1, limit the duration of the outage. And two, it would also give BGE to maybe in the future completely eliminate outages given the improved capabilities of the new network. So those are the two reasons. First being the radios will be unsupported and therefore rendering the existing system obsolete. And the second being the improved system that limits outages or maybe in the near future even completely eliminates outages.
Great, thank you. I think that was very thorough. I think I only have one last question for you. It's my understanding that the reason you're going at this location on Juniata Street is because that location is central to BG's devices in the area. Is that accurate?
Correct. So as part of picking a location to install a pole, we have a very robust or holistic process where we visit all the substations within the area to, one, understand the topography of the land, two, to understand if there is space within the substation for us to install a pole, and the third reason being that to also understand if the antennas that will be going on the pole will have the ability to propagate without any obstructions. So given the due diligence that we did, as well as the visits that were held with all the stakeholders involved, we decided that this location serves the purpose. And as Jen alluded to, it's also central to all the devices in the locality that operate within the network. So that gives us the ability to, one, reduce latency in terms of how fast information is sent back to the BGE service, and also gives us the ability to obviously improve service within that area.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have for Mr. Newman.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Newman?
I got one. Is 80 feet going to be enough?
So, yeah, so as I think Shane mentioned that the topography in this area is very flat, and therefore that's more the reason why we need something higher to allow for propagation of the signal without any obstructions.
Yeah, this has always been known as radio-free Havre de Grace. I belong to the fire company, and the fire company has a repeating system that's over by the WXCY radio station that sends the signal up to about I-95 so it can get to the rest of the county. But okay, that's all.
Oh, okay. Did I answer the question, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a quick question. Is this tower going to have guy wires or is it just a freestanding?
Just a freestanding tower.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you
Any other
very
questions?
much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everybody.
Next, I'll go ahead and call Mr. Paul Whitley.
I might have suggested that might be put too close to the speaker. Bring it back a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. There you go. See how that sounds.
How you doing?
That's
evening.
good.
Paul, you can go ahead and introduce yourself, where you work, and yeah.
My name's Paul Whitley. I work for Network Building and Consulting. I have worked in the wireless industry for 20 years. Site development work in zoning, permitting, site acquisition, just developing wireless facilities. In this case, at this site, I'm handling part of the applications with Shane, and my company prepared the photo simulation, part of the application package. So those photo simulations are basically done to give you an idea or a perspective of what the existing site looks like now, and then what the site will look like with the proposed pole in place. So they'll go and they'll drive around, and our engineers will pick out places where that pole will be visible. They insert the pole in digitally and show you a before and after picture of what it looks like with the proposed pole and what it looks like existing without, to give you an idea of what it'll look like. In this particular case, there were 5 views.
And I just, one quick sec, I have this on paper if you'd like me to pass it out. You can also see the screen. Maybe, should I go
Well-
ahead and pass it out, or just?
One of those screens, can they be turned? One of them? Oh, I'm sorry, right there. Yeah, right. You're right.
Yeah, Paul, just a little bit closer.
All right, we're good.
Okay.
Would you like me to each give you one of these?
Please.
Okay. Did you say please? Okay. Is it okay if I approach without my mask?
Sure. Thanks, it's just 4 of us, yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
So in this case, when they did their due diligence and drove the area, they came up with 5 locations where it would be a good location to show the pole proposed and the existing conditions. I can go through each view with you, or if you want to take a look through them, and if you have any questions, I can answer.
This first page is not Havre de Grace.
Yeah.
The cover page, it looks like another town.
Like Aberdeen.
Did I pass out the wrong thing?
I think it's just the first page appears to be an extra that shouldn't have been included. The second page it seems to be correct. I think you added just an extra page maybe from another project.
Okay, maybe it looks at the aerial as the
So we'll
wrong
just take the
one.
first page and tear it off.
Sure, if you don't mind, thank you.
All right, no problem.
Okay.
So the
Then this-
first page should be, it should be labeled like a map, like view 1,
Right.
5. And then each of those locations, when you look through the photos, they have the actual street address or intersection where those photos were taken.
So Paul, why don't we go to the first one right here? And we'll be brief, but the first one is,
That's a
View
view
1S,
south
okay.
to the proposed pole location at the corner of Juniata and Bourbon Street.
and then the next slide shows with the pole inserted.
Right, the second slide shows the pole and it has a small red arrow. It's to the left of the existing pole that's there now.
And then the next view,
The next view, view 2, that's a view from the south looking north at the proposed pole from South Juniata Street and Girard Street, that intersection.
and then the pole inserted.
Then view 3, that one is a view from the southeast, and that's at South Juniata and Revolution Street. And then view 4 is from the southwest. That is 811 Revolution Street.
Okay,
And view 5 is Bloomsbury Avenue. Any questions or concerns?
Okay, great.
questions? Anybody? Okay,
Do you have to coordinate with any of the other vendors in the area that provide wireless service, like Verizon?
Well, that's more a technical question.
Mr. Dyer can answer that if you'd like, but I think Paul is aware. He can explain that there is no co-location is maybe the
Right.
question.
There are BGE operates at their own frequency,
Okay,
where it does not interfere with the other wireless carriers.
okay,
And that's, to add on earlier, it shouldn't interfere with any emergency 911 or EMS services as well.
okay.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. I apologize for the aerial. As you can tell, we have another site in a different jurisdiction. Okay. And then the last witness, Mr. Rich Dyer. Again, I have a resume if anyone would like to see it. Mr. Dyer, why don't you go ahead and explain why you're here tonight, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. My name is Rich Dyer. I'm a principal with Morrison Ritchie Associates. I supervise the civil and structural plans for this project for BG&E.
Thank you. And what is your involvement with this petition that we're here for tonight?
My involvement is, like I said, I supervise the preparation of the civil and structural plans of the BG&E monopole and the compound, or the small compound. And I also oversaw the structural engineering associated with the monopole and the geotechnical engineering that went into the design.
Thank you very much. And you did seal the plan that was submitted as well, correct? Thanks. What is the site zoned?
The site is, the subject property is zoned Z for commercial.
C. right?
C, excuse me.
Yeah. I couldn't hear if you said C or Z. I
C.
apologize.
A
Yeah.
little bit of both, right? C.
Thank you. And can you explain what the site's like today?
The site is, mentioned earlier, there's a substation on the subject property. There's a one-story brick control house that BG&E uses that's surrounded by a 6-foot tall chain link fence. And it's located in next to an existing industrial facility, just south of a athletic field.
Great, thank you. Do you know any heights of other existing structures in the area?
I do. Like I said, like I just mentioned, just north of the field, or just north of the substation, there are athletic field that has, I believe, 4 light poles that are, galvanized steel monopoles that are in the 80 to 90 foot range height-wise. To the east of the substation, there is a industrial plant that has a chimney, a brick chimney, that is estimated to be 90 tall, which is nestled within some buildings that are, that same facility, that are 60 to 70 feet tall.
Thank you. I apologize, it just occurred to me, we don't really have the site plan up. Does anyone, I guess if there's questions, we could try to put that up, Shane, or everyone has a copy of the site plan?
It shouldn't be a problem, yeah.
Okay.
They should have it in their staff reports.
Okay. And then, Rich, if you would, we're here for a variance. Am I correct that we're here for a variance for 80-foot tall pole in lieu of the otherwise allowed by right 60 feet? Is that correct? Okay. Okay, with regard to the variance itself, are you familiar with the Havre de Grace Code and the requirements for approving a variance?
I have reviewed it.
Thank you. In your expert opinion, will the scale and the intensity of the use, being that and we're talking about the accessory equipment, this tower, will that be out of character with the existing uses on the property and those on the adjacent properties?
No, it's not my opinion. It's, as I mentioned, there's some adjacent steel galvanized monopoles that are very similar to, there's other industrial type structures in the area. So there's, see from this photo, there's a number of utility poles in the area, so it blends in.
And thank you. What about the adverse effects? Do you, in your opinion, do you have an opinion on whether the proposed tower will have any adverse effects or detrimental impacts on the surrounding area?
I do not believe it'll have any adverse effects. I mean, from a safety standpoint, structurally, as I mentioned, we formed the design of this. It's relatively lightly loaded capacity to support BG&E's installation, and also, in accordance with code required wind speeds, ice loads. So, plenty of safety built in.
Thank you. In your expert opinion, would a denial of the requested relief result in a practical difficulty or unreasonable hardship here?
It would, just because BG&E, it's for BG&E to place a pole. Mentioned earlier, scour of different areas with substations, and this is one of the few locations where it would be able to function and support BG&E's needs.
Thank you. Do you have an opinion on whether the grant of the requested relief would do substantial injury to the public health, safety, or general welfare?
I do. It was designed with current codes and various design speeds and ice loads that pole is very, very safe.
Thank you. Last question. In your opinion, do you believe that the benefits accruing from the grant of the requested relief will outweigh any potential injury to the public health, safety, and general welfare?
I do. I think the benefit that BG&E is going to gain, the public is going to gain from the safety of this far outweighs any very, very unlikely detrimental to the public.
Thank you very much. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioners, do you have any questions of the current presenter? No? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And with that, we would rest our case.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to hear any discussion among the commissioners. Any questions?
I'll guess I'll start out. I think this is a much-needed thing to improve the quality of the electric in the city here. If you drive around, you might notice there's a bunch of antennas sitting on where there used to be a manual switch. Now there's an antenna up there that controls that. So this is all part of that system, which can help, if there's a power outage, kind of redirect the power to somewhere where it can be used.
Thank you. And looking at these before and after photographs from each vantage point, once they put the proposed tower into the picture, I could hardly tell the difference. And I think that that the visual impact is negligible, and I doubt seriously that any citizens would even realize anything had changed. Just looking at those photographs. It seems to me that there's no adverse impact in this particular case. Anybody else?
I had a couple of thoughts. The
Yes.
first one was, you know, I appreciate the photo montage. You know, one of the things that crossed my mind is I wish we could have seen a picture of a similar tower, just what it looks like, you know, from the base up. But that said, I think that the representations of before and after went well. I also believe that, you know, regardless of where the line of sight radios go and everything else like that, that fortunately for everybody, that is probably the best location in Havre de Grace that you can put this thing there, you know. So I'm glad, you know, it's lined up that way because, you know, that isn't the prettiest part of town as far as, you know, with the industrial, so that, you know, glad it lined up like that.
Yeah. Made things a little easier.
You know, there's just one other thing that crossed my mind while you're talking, and I know, you know, how BG&E works and everything. They're very methodical and they go through everything applicable. And
Harry, could you make sure your mic is,
sorry about that. But, you know, there's a lot of osprey around here too. So I don't know what kind of shelves or antenna supports that you're going to have on there, but, you know, there's a lot of osprey around here. And they like antenna towers like that, that's for sure. So just one more thing to keep in mind. Thanks.
That's a good point. If you can just make sure that the structure up in the air is kept to a horizontal minimal to prevent anything like that.
The antennas are supported
Yeah.
by side arms.
Because once a nest starts, you can't even go up there. You know, you don't want that. Okay, are we ready to?
Just one more question, just for anybody who's a network engineer. So if you're putting this upgrade in Havre de Grace, I'm sure you've installed a similar system somewhere else as well, and you've tested it, and it's foolproof.
Correct, yes. As it stands today, the system is being tested out in different locations within the BGE territory. So,
So it's not the only upgrade of its kind.
exactly, yes.
I think this is the 60th pole that BG&E's done. Project of 100.
Wow.
Right.
Okay, at this point, I would, if we're done with discussion.
I'd like to, if I can,
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to propose to approve the variance.
Okay, you want to move to
Approve
approve.
the variance of it.
Now,
Did I say 80 feet?
okay, and let me just suggest that in introducing that motion, that you also include, for the planning department's benefit, that, where am I here? You don't have conditions, do you?
Nope.
just one basic, that they should have all applicable permits they should apply for all applicable, just a very standard comment, so nothing that necessarily needs to be incorporated.
Doesn't have to be
into
incorporated in the
a-
motion.
Yeah, I mean, it,
Okay, so we have a motion that we recommend to the Board of Appeals that they approve this project. Is that the way you want that motion to
Yes,
go?
please.
Yeah. Okay. Let me make,
I'll second it.
okay, let me do some paperwork here. Any discussion on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, I'm going to call the roll. Jim Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw,
Yes.
Harry Miller,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. So, this motion carries 4 in favor and none against. And here's what happens next. You'll be taking this to the Board of Appeals. Any case that comes from us and goes to the Board of Appeals, as chair, I show up at that hearing, and I'm there to defend our recommendation in case defense is necessary. And so congratulations. We hope the next step works well for you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Ford, if I may, we have a number of people outside waiting on the next plan, so if we can take a brief recess so we can get them in, do the COVID screenings and.
Yeah, that's why I hit the hammer. Yeah. I figured you had them hiding. The Havre de Grace Planning Commission meeting for September 28th, 2020 will now come back to order. And the next case that we're going to hear is building permit number 2021-0073, brought by Bully Rock Investments LLC. It is for approval of a site and subdivision plan for 75 single-family lots known as Parcel P. At this time, I will go to Mr. Grimm of the Planning Department to give us a synopsis.
Thank you, sir. I'll briefly go over my staff report for this. This is for the subdivision and site plans for Parcel P. In the matter of efficiency, we allowed the consolidation of the plan, the subdivision and site plans into one plan. Parcel P is located on the east side of Bully Rock Parkway, and it's been designated as Parcel P, I believe, since the original concept plan. And as you know, Bully Rock is a mixture of housing types, ranging from condos to townhouses to multifamily dwellings and, of course, single-family homes. Bayview Estates abuts the Parcel P to the east. And then, of course, to the west is the remainder of Bully Rock that is somewhat built out and still some remaining parcels to be developed. Right now, Parcel P is predominantly mature forest. However, there are areas that were previously graded that appear to be naturally regenerating. Topography of Parcel P is moderately sloping to, in some areas, steeply sloping adjacent to some streams. There are non-tidal wetlands on the property. And I did provide you with a copy of the aerial photo showing the topography and the streams. Parcel P originally received approval through the Planning Commission on September 14th, 2015. And I don't believe that there is much difference in this plan that is being presented today than the originally approved plans. Some minor adjustments potentially, and it did receive, the Planning Commission did approve extensions of that previous approval in 2016 and 2017. However, that extension did expire, and that's why we're back before you again today. As with most of Bully Rock, it is zoned R Residential District, as shown on the enclosed map. And we reviewed the plan in accordance with applicable code sections, and we did offer a number of conditions as part of the staff report from the Department of Planning and the Department of Public Works, and I've also included different comments from other agencies as well in the back of my report, as I typically do for larger projects. We did issue an amended staff report that you all should have gotten a copy of, just to modify 3 different sections in there. One was related to the timing of improvements of Bully Rock Parkway.
Could you cite the numbers of those?
Sure, I apologize, Volney, I don't have the amended one, but let me see here real quick. I can show you. It is the number 6 under the Department of Planning, related to Bully Rock Parkway.
And what did you...
That was changed in the amended staff report that you have to allow for half of the dwellings proposed to be constructed prior to the actual completion of Bully Rock Parkway. So we got specific about the timing of those improvements. So essentially, the plans, which to my understanding have already been approved for the culvert and the roadway, those plans will be reviewed again just by Tim Whitty, but essentially they've already been approved. And prior to a grading permit, they'll have to be approved for certain. And then after that, we will begin issuing building permits for those homes up to, I think we said, half of the, what we did say, I'm sorry, half of the units. Before they can go over that half, they have to begin construction of that roadway. And then the other one in there, we did make a change to, it was a mistake regarding some Public Works comments. And then the last one that we did was related to damages to Bully Rock Parkway or other roads. After speaking with Mr. Ward, he had reviewed the conditions in the staff report, and he just wanted to add some clarity to that, stating that any change or any damages to any public or private roads that are a result of the developer or their contractors, that they will be responsible for. So that obviously made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, and those were the only substantive amendments. And that's all I really have at this time. The department supports the approval of the site plan and subdivisions, subject to the conditions outlined. And that's all I have at this time. Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions or need any clarification from Mr. Grimm? Hearing none, we will turn to the applicant. And whoever wishes to speak on behalf of the applicant, if you would take turns and give your name and either business or personal address. And then go ahead.
Good evening, I'm Taylor Becker. I'm a landscape architect with Morrison Ritchie Associates. I'm here with Jeff Matai. He's an associate of MRA, as well as Bob Ward and Robert Holwick over here. And like Shane said, we're here for the Parcel P development of the Bully Rock site. And in front here, as you're talking about, Parcel P is located here. This is the concept plan that was approved back in 2003 with the Planning Commission. With it had the max development of 2,126 units, of which 1,400 have already been sold. Like Shane said, the zoning for the property is residential, but it has a planned adult community overlay with it for Parcel P. With it, we are proposing 75 single-family detached homes or units with 2 parking spaces for each unit, in total being 150 parking spaces. As part of the approval process, we plan on providing a forest conservation plan, landscape plan, and open space amenity plan as we move forward. The lots are serviced by public water and sewer, and as I'm going through that, I should turn this around so you guys can get. It's the rendered plan that we had submitted. And as part of it, the roads and storm drains are private. If I hadn't already said, the lots are serviced by public water and sewer. Right now, we have the stormwater concept plan for the development. It has been submitted and is for review. As a part of the development, we are providing an emergency access lane that is gated into the Bayview Estates, which is just east of the site, and that proposed access point is right here. You can see it, guys' plans. And with that, it's going to be locked access, just strictly for emergency vehicles in and out of the community. And that is pretty much the overview that I have for you guys as to summarize the project.
Any questions from the commissioners? No? Okay. Do you have another presenter? Thank you.
I'll turn it over to Robert Holwick that can address some of the conditions that you were just talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Robert Holwick of Bob Ward Companies, or Bully Rock Investments, excuse me. So Taylor went over the highlights of the project. So tonight, some of the residents on Willow Way are concerned about the emergency access.
Excuse me. Anybody that's speaking at the mic, if you want to drop your mask, you're welcome to. It's up to you. There you go.
Much better, yeah. So some of the folks here tonight are from Willow Way, and they're concerned over the emergency access. So from what we understand, that was a condition put on the original plan. And it appears they're mostly concerned about it being a public street extension one day, but the right-of-way that connects that to the future road in our Parcel P is only 20 foot wide. So your code, I believe, is 50 foot for a public street. So the likelihood of that ever getting connected without tearing the house down is slim to very none. So that's, really, I just wanted to point that out because I know a lot of the residents are concerned.
I might interject something here, just since we're on that subject, and that is that the very fact that we were able to deal with emergency vehicle access in this fashion eliminates the need to put a cut-through street. If we couldn't come up with a solution like this, there probably would have to be a connecting street. So this basically is designed to prevent that from happening. And we've done this in other places as well. Who else? Does anybody have a question of? Okay. Anyone else from the applicant who wishes to speak? No? Okay. Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to speak to this application? Okay, you raise your hand first. If you would come up and give us your name and address.
Hi, my name is Chris Darling, live at 328 Willow Way. So it's the last house on the street. I want to say I was here 5 years ago. I wanted to thank the committee because they had made a motion that was granted based on a couple of contingencies. One was to move the access road from right on the end of my driveway to across the street, which I see in the plan that's been done, and also was to build a visual barrier. So I'm here today really to have a few, I guess, clarifying comments on the visual barrier. And it appears that it was made. In the drawing, it appears that there's an elevation between that gap that's about 75 feet wide and 8 feet tall. So it was suggested to be some sort of a subtle berm that was built and to have a dense forest of evergreens planted across the top. I just wanted to know if that was still part of the visual barrier because it wasn't specified in the plan that was provided.
I'm going to turn the question to Mr. Grimm.
Yes, based on the plans, there is a berm that rises to about elevation 158, which then goes down to about 148 at Mr. Darling's property. So there is a berm that comes up right behind that property, in between his property and the new lots that are proposed.
Thank you. Does that?
Well, so part of that was done obviously so that the front of our houses wouldn't be looking into the backs. So, there's some elevation around that sort of suggests that behind the berm that the elevation goes up. So the idea was, is there going to be any trees planted across on the top of that berm to extend the visual barrier higher up? When we had our meeting back in 2015, it was suggested that to be included as part of the visual. I have the notes.
No, there's no suggestion at this time for that. There is no, in the City of Havre de Grace code, there is no buffering or landscaping requirement for buffering adjacent to properties, and specifically between properties with similar type uses. So you have single families adjacent to single families. It's not typical to require a buffer, even if we were in a jurisdiction that required buffers in between two communities of similar types of uses or densities. But, again, if the Planning Commission put a condition on the project last time in 2015, that is a moot point now because it's expired.
Okay, so that's what I would be asking for then, is to ensure that is going to be built, and if at all possible, because, on my property specifically, on the one side, there would be 4 or 5 properties bridging along that one property line, and so visual barrier would be very important for me, and so it's maybe not be conditional or customary, but I would be asking, is it possible to build a line of trees across the top of that berm?
You don't need to ask me. You need to ask the commission.
We'll discuss it during our discussion period.
Okay. I'll be able to speak more later if
We can come back to you if you wish.
thank you so much.
But let me see if I understand this correctly. What's your?
I wish I would have brought I didn't think I was going to need a
it's-
presentation, but
I understand what you want to do. It's kind of hard to put that into something that's more legalistic.
yeah, so.
Well, I've got to figure out a vehicle to ensure that it's done in a fashion that would be useful. And of course, the commission has to decide whether it really should impose that on the developer or not. So, but at this time, is there anything else that you would like to add to support your request?
I mean, just the fact that, again, along one property line, I'm going to have 5 adjoining properties and potential visual of my property. And so, and the fact that there's a very steep portion of that land in the back that has a rise of about 16 feet. So building a berm of 8 feet across and the properties being potentially 8 feet above that doesn't really provide a whole lot of visual barrier. So again, last time we were here, I think it was Mr. Ford, or Mr. Bouts, I think, was suggesting to have trees as well as a barrier.
I think I remember that discussion.
Yes.
Yeah.
You were here.
Yeah, but I mean, still, I've done a lot of these.
That's right.
Sometimes it's hard to remember. Hang on 1 second, let me just look at this.
Typically, in the back corner of that lot, the property, the land rises about 16 feet.
Well, one thing we're going to have to take into consideration is if we do it in one place, do we have to do it all the way down through the entire subdivision? You know, because we're backing up to Bayview Estates the whole way, all the way down. And, you know, we have to take that into consideration.
Sorry, I meant to say, and I guess in our case, there's like 3 or 4 properties that will have a visual straight line into the backs of their properties from the front of our houses.
From the side of your house?
From the front. There's a pretty large angle from the front of 328 across the street that'll all be basically properties. There's probably 3 or 4 properties that will be seeing directly into their back.
Okay, we'll have to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to address the commission? Yes.
Hi, I'm Jessica Adams. I live at 309 Willow Way, which is right about... So I'm at the very end, the last adjacent home on Willow Way. Of course, my concerns are the type of stormwater management and the upkeep from the community for basically visual purposes. I know we're here. We completely understand we do not own that property, and it's not our right to demand what goes on it. But we're just trying to, again, kind of look for that visual for our homes. It breaks my heart. I only moved here 2.5 years ago. And unfortunately, I didn't see this plan before I bought the home. It probably would have pumped the brakes for me on purchasing this. I originally bought a home off of Lewis Lane in Haverty Hills without any homes built. A couple years into it, we opened an access across that Route 40 on Lewis Lane, which then became a major cut through. So the main reason I moved to Willow Way was to limit my traffic on a street where I have young kids that play. So I was more or less, again, worried about this emergency access. I understand it at most will be 12 feet. It can never become a residential road. It will be gated. I've been told that it's been recommended, and I'm not getting a clear view of who recommended it. So I talked to the fire chief, Scott Hurst. He has no need for it, did not say he needed it, doesn't want it. So then I checked with the EMT chief, Peter Quackenbush. He also said he does not need it, did not request it. So I was wondering if it's from a EMT emergency standpoint, talking to both of the chiefs, is it really necessary? So we're not in a floodplain where we would need to be, evacuated for a flood. My home's been there 21 years, and it's never needed any sort of evacuation. We have the timeline of Bully Rock Parkway being completed. That would, if anything, logistically quicken. It would be quicker to get from the Susquehanna Hose on Chapel going down Bully Rock Parkway, where no homes are on Bully Rock Parkway. There's no driveways, there's no cars parked in the street, there's no kids playing in the street. So I get it, it's emergency vehicles, but more vehicles on my road, regardless of what kind, I don't want. So my thoughts are, would Bob Ward Properties want to even go through this cost when both current chiefs are really not in favor of needing it?
We will definitely take that up in discussion.
Okay, so I talked to Peter and Scott earlier today, and I did say that I would be using their names. Both of them couldn't make it to the meeting tonight. I was trying to get them to come. But of course, also the plea to Bob Ward to, try to keep as many of those existing trees on that corner. I know it's benefiting my home directly because it's the trees in my direct backyard, but just try, whatever they could do when planning that storm water management system and seeing what trees, instead of clearing and then deciding, possibly having that decision made, and then maybe seeing that, maybe 10 more feet of those trees could stay, would be something that, of course, because it's my existing backyard, that I bought for the ambiance of the trees behind me. So, any questions for me?
Anybody have any questions of the presenter? No?
All right,
Thank you very
for your
much.
time.
Is there anyone else here that would like to present to the commission? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Todd Sather. I live at 321 Willow Way. Right there. I have, one of my biggest concerns, and a lot of people are mentioning it tonight, is, the trees. I bought the home 3.5 years ago. It was beautiful. I want to say 3 months ago, contractors came in and started tearing them down. Now it's a complete mess. Debris everywhere, animals everywhere, so on and so forth. That concerns me. I'm all about making money for Havre de Grace and the whole community, and bringing more people in and families and community, but that really concerns me of, the easement and the structures, going up in there. It's just now, if you look at my particular property, there is a gaping hole from me to you that I can see straight into Bully Rock. Brand new homes, parking lot, sitting out on my back deck. I didn't have that before, and that frustrates me.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So you say that there's work going on behind your house right now?
Yeah, several months ago, they cleared out. They knocked down trees, they come halfway off, they didn't go to the roof. How are you doing on another contract? Whatever happened back there? Yes. It's frustrating. Granted, the kids, they'll go across there occasionally.
Can you come back?
You need to go to
mic?
the spot, to the mic.
I apologize.
They're recording, so.
Okay, I apologize.
Okay.
But it's just, with the kids running around and everything, and, it's a mess back there.
Shane, you have any clue what that work is right now?
And
The site plan isn't even approved. It can't be related to this.
Yeah, they have an approved concept plan. They have approved forest stand delineation and forest conservation plans. And one of the number one things that Mr. Ward had his folks do when he purchased the property was go in and clear out existing utility easements that there are all throughout, like any project of this size, all throughout the development. And due to a lack of maintenance, there were trees and other things growing on top of sewer mains and water lines, and you never want to have that, obviously. So that was the number one thing to do. And they were also doing initial clearing in preparation of this, which the site plan does not necessarily need to be approved for that. And as long as they're not pulling stumps, a grading permit would not be required for that. Grading permit is only required when you're actually doing land disturbing activities in the sense of you're actually putting a shovel in the ground, you're pulling and clearing and grubbing, as you know. So
There are trees.
right, correct.
Right. Thank you, Shane.
Right.
But so during the clearing process, they also push it so far in onto my property as well.
They put it on your property?
When they were clearing the debris, they spread it everywhere. It was on my property. I took the time to move it out, and now it's just, like I said, it's a complete mess. I would like to see it addressed. And amongst, the soil samples, yes, there were soil samples, and there was also debris left with the soil samples too, bottles and whatnot, scattered all throughout the woods.
But they also encroached on your property.
Yes.
Did you speak with them? Because that's a matter between you and them. It's,
Yeah, I said something, they said, well, we don't know anything, we were just told to clear this out. And I'm just like, okay, how close are you gonna get? And unfortunately, they didn't have any details to that nature.
well, if your property is not restored to your satisfaction,
Sure.
I would think that you have
Yes, sir.
a civil issue with the developer.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that sort of thing is beyond the scope of a planning commission, but
Understood.
yeah, but I'm sorry to hear it happen,
Yeah, I'm trying to
and I'm surprised.
make sense of it, why it happened, where we're
Yeah.
going with it, and just, if
Right.
we can, the trees can remain, that'd be a big thing, especially for resale value,
Right. Well, I have to say that as we've said to many, many people that have appeared before us, particularly from affected public, affected neighbors, that developments occur in cities and towns. That's what they're designed for, is for development. The state of Maryland's planning directive is to concentrate development in existing municipalities and not spread it all over the county as much as possible. And these concept plans have been on record for years. And it's there, at some point, there comes a need for due diligence from home purchasers. And when they see a beautiful expanse of woods out there and trees and everything, and they wonder, well, who does that belong to and what's going to become of that? I would think that the first thing would be to go right down to City Hall and say, what's in the planning, because years ago, things like this could happen within a year or two, from just raw land to finished lots, and those days are long gone. It takes years, if not decades, for things like this to develop to maturity, so we know way in advance what's going to happen. We also know that today, in order to put in infrastructure and put in stormwater management facilities, that everything just has to be literally scraped to the ground. I mean, it's a shame. When I was a builder and developer in Virginia many decades ago, and we would just go in between the trees and develop the streets and develop the houses, build the houses, and we would still leave the forest there right stuck between the trees, between the houses. And you can't do that anymore. It's against the law. It's not the way development is allowed to be done. And I don't understand it, but that's the way it is. And so when another section is about to be developed, you're pretty much going to be subject to what we call a scarred earth situation, and then you just try to save as many border trees as you can, and we're going to discuss that tonight.
Sure, absolutely.
To try to do what we can to save those, save as much as possible. Sounds like in your case, they took them out right to your property line and even jumped your property line.
Yes, sir.
So thank you so much for your concern. And okay.
Thank you.
Does anyone else like to speak from the public? And then I'll come back.
John Starkell, I live at 322 Willow Way, which, well, it's on here as well. I'm near the affected cul-de-sac. And again, just to back up what my other two neighbors have said, the reasons we moved there were because it was cul-de-sac property. This, although, as you said, had been on the planning stages, is, I believe, as Mr. Grimm said, now expired. So it's up for debate again. Putting in that access way, although it is claimed to be currently a locked access for emergency services, as has also been stated, neither the EMS or fire feel it's necessary or would use it. My fear is that, as it's been done in many other subdivisions that I'm aware of, next, the guy who's on the volunteer fire department cuts a key for his buddy who's an Amazon driver. Now they've all got it. So it's going to increase access. It adds that potential for residents on the street that now we have the increased volume like you have in Havertide Hills. And then that's going to affect the property prices, which I invested in my property, which then, of course, affects the mill rate and what gets taken in by the state for the insurance or the taxation. So I would like to see, yes, if we can add a visual break to that so that, one of the beautiful things about Bayview Estates is back my property has a nice green space there. And so it's almost like I live in the forest or in a parkway. And would hate to see that disturbed. We also have fox in the area, which, although not a protected animal, is a pretty common rabies carrier. So again, now you're going to disturb their homelands further, and it takes that into effect. So there's the financial aspect, there's the safety aspect, and if it is a necessity of the EMS and fire to get access to Bully Rock, then I think we should be reconsidered whether or not that access way is acceptable to both parties.
Thank you. Mr. Grimm, would you describe the locking, unlocking system for one of these?
Sure.
I saw the term used in the report.
Sure. I may defer to Mr. Miller because him being in the fire department, he's more experienced with the technical aspects of it. But typically, these types of accesses are keyed with what's called a Knox box. I don't know all the details of a Knox box, but I did have a discussion with someone else in the city who is familiar with these. And they usually work on a frequency kind of system where a frequency is sent to the gate to lock it, to unlock the gate to allow for emergency access. That's typically the standard, and in all throughout Harford County, it's not unusual to see Knox box keyed emergency accesses, whether it be an emergency access across the emergency access drive or it's a Knox box to get into a building. They're a common apparatus used in emergency access.
But it's not something where you can just cut a key and give it to a friend.
Absolutely not. The condition in the report says that it should be a Knox box keyed access. I must say that I talked to Scotty Hurst myself, and I came away with a different feeling about his opinion. His opinion was that they didn't think they needed it, but while he was on the phone with me, he went through a series of scenarios in his head where it might be used, although unlikely. So he didn't give me the indication that absolutely it shouldn't be there, but in my opinion, as a planner, it never hurts to have too much emergency access. And in this case, it cannot be a public road. It doesn't meet the Harford County Road Code requirements for width, right-of-way, construction practices, anything like that. Furthermore, Bully Rock is a private community, and I don't think that the residents that are there now intend to have any or would want to have connectivity. That flies in the face of my planner background too, because I believe in connectivity, but this was designed as a private community. So I think the fears that this will turn into some type of access way where mail or Amazon or anything, those are unfounded. They do not have access to the wireless technology or keys or anything that would allow them to access through that way. So, I believe it's important, never hurts to have too many emergency access points.
And they've got a main gate where they
That's correct,
where
sir.
they intend to screen anybody that comes into the entire community.
That's
So
correct, sir. So
They
they
don't want
wouldn't,
anybody sneaking in back there.
right, they're not going to put their, and in fact, they're putting a new gate in now, which is costing a lot of money. So I don't see why they would ever then say, okay, we put all this money in for a gate, but we're now going to allow an access here. But again, I can't stress enough. You can see the width of Willow Way's right-of-way and the road itself on the plan, and you see this little access path that's 12
What's
feet wide.
what's that access lane going to be paved in?
It'll be typically macadam.
Okay.
That'll be a macadam path that'll be wide enough and constructed enough to allow for emergency vehicle access.
But no curb and gutter, just paved.
There shouldn't be any curb and gutter. There would be no reason for curb and gutter.
Okay.
Furthermore, you have two homes on either side that are not set up in such a way where they would have a front yard setback off of what we would say their side is, because if it was going to be a public road access, we'd say you'd have two frontages, which we're not saying that because it's not a public road.
In other words, for that reason, that you would have a zoning issue with both of those
That's
houses.
exactly correct.
All right. Now, Willow Way is not a cul-de-sac street.
No, it's a dead end, it dead ends at the property line.
And
for
it was
Bully Rock.
designed originally to extend into the Bully Rock area by its very design. It just came to a screeching halt right up against that property line. Is that correct?
Right, it's not unusual, all throughout this county. There are roads just like Willow Way that I think the foresight was good, that, they should put these roads in so that there is connectivity in what I call interparcel connections, which is a good thing, but in many instances, for whatever reason, maybe the developer's intent of those properties, it didn't make sense to have that road there because their design layout is different and really doesn't match up with the roads that are existing. So it's not uncommon to see that.
So would it be fair to say that in the interim period to now that obviously the city did not want connectivity when we approved Bully Rock?
That's correct, because it was approved, and the mayor and city council took up legislation at that time to create what was called a planned adult community, which had specific provisions unlike any other zoning district in the city of Havre de Grace. So yes, at that time, with the annexation, conceivably, the mayor and city council could have said, no, we want you to connect to Willow Way, and made that a part of the annexation. They did not, and then they subsequently adopted the planned adult community.
So since Bully Rock is a gated community, and as you expressed a few minutes ago, that the proper gating system that they're having to install now is very, very expensive, what do you think the likelihood that Bully Rock Homeowners Association would ever want to invest in a gated entrance right there?
I just can't see it. It makes no.
I mean, where would they even put the gated entrance?
They wouldn't. I mean, it's not designed for two-way traffic. I mean, even if you wanted to do that, it'd be one way only, because you have a lot smack dab pretty much in the middle of what would be the extension of Willow Way's right-of-way.
Now, another person that spoke, the lady that spoke, was of the opinion that our emergency services organizations had no need for this emergency connection. What's your feeling about that?
As I said, I spoke with Scott Hurst and came away with a different takeaway, that he didn't really think it was necessary, but again, he went through different scenarios where it might be likely. So I'll just go on record saying the Department of Planning in the city of Havre de Grace would like to have this emergency access as was originally planned. So regardless of what the EMS and Scotty Hurst say, we believe that it makes sense to have emergency access.
Okay. Okay, fellow commissioners, we've heard some concerns. Oh, by the way, is anyone else that wanted to speak? Somebody else over here raised a hand. I'm sorry, come on up.
If I may, just before, the last gentleman spoke, can I get your name again, please?
It's John.
John. Spell your last name, please. Thank you, sir.
Now, sir, if you would give us your name and address.
Right, I'm Robert Alexander at 324 Lockhart Court. It backs up to a little further upstream to the parcel. And I moved here in 2013. I don't remember ever being notified of a previous planning meeting in 2015, so I, whatever. But I knew I was buying a property that backed up to Bully Rock. And so I knew that they were eventually going to build back there. And of course, I saw where the forest conservation signs were, and it didn't concern me at all, to be quite honest. This past winter during COVID, they started, clearing back there and moving the signs. And they moved the signs up, I'm going to say 60, 70 yards closer to the stream behind my property. And that stream is extremely variable in both path and width, depending upon what kind of rainstorms are occurring. And where they've got that sign right now, seems to me is way less than 25 feet between that stream and that sign. And I just think they're encroaching upon the actual stream itself. And I haven't surveyed it. I'm sure they, I heard them speaking out front. We talked a little bit, and they claim that it's now properly surveyed, and that's where the signs are going, and that's what we're going to clear to, as I understand it. And I think that should be relooked, because that stream can become very, I'm going to say, swift running. I mean, it doesn't follow that little contour that you see, like today, where we haven't had, we've had a little rain, but not a lot. It's just I'm concerned that they're encroaching on that stream and taking down more woods than they probably really should and could. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Grimm, back to you. What is the city's method of reviewing the surveys and reviewing the product that the developer is?
Sure. Well, first, there was an original forest conservation plan that was done long before my time here. I'd say mid to late last year. I spoke with the consultant and Jeff Mathai specifically about getting a new revised forest conservation plan in. And I believe that's what prompted, along with Mr. Ward's purchase of the property. Of course, he was having surveys done anyways to see, as there's a significant amount of parcels that make up Bully Rock. And as part of that, they did their due diligence to look at the surveys and survey the actual limits of the proposed forest conservation as shown on the forest conservation plan. And that's after speaking with Mr. Holwick from Bob Ward Homes, he informed me that the original, whoever staked out those limits, that was incorrect, and that they corrected that based on survey information. I know that they were out there. I've received a number of calls that there were surveyors out on the site, so I know that they've been out surveying. Secondary to that, to Mr. Alexander's question, is that the developer will have to prepare sediment and erosion control plans that will be reviewed by the Soil Conservation District. The City of Havre de Grace doesn't have the authority to review sediment and erosion control plans and make approval. So those do go to the Soil Conservation District, who will review those, and if they feel that there's any encroachment into buffers or anything like that, they'll let us know. Of course, our Department of Public Works Director Tim Woody will also be looking at that. If there is any proposed encroachment into the 25-foot state wetland buffer, then MRA has been in business for a long time, and they know that they are required to get permits from the Maryland Department of Environment and or the Army Corps of Engineers, depending on the level of impact, whether it's just impacts to wetlands or if there are in-stream impacts. So those are reviewed at the time of that a sediment erosion control plan and grading plans are submitted to the city, and they are scrutinized to ensure that. And certainly, as part of this project during the construction, MDE does make routine inspections, as well as staff from the city make routine inspections during the construction phase to ensure that fencing is placed in areas where it denotes, there shouldn't, essentially there are limited disturbance so that they're not disturbing areas they're not supposed to be in. So those are all details that are worked out in the engineering plans.
If the property owner, in light of all that, still thinks that there's a mistake or he has a serious concern, who should he go to?
Well, first I would say it would be myself. He could contact the Department of Planning and contact me with the Department of Planning, and I will address his concerns. If his concerns are really more state-oriented with respects to wetlands, then I would advise them to contact the Maryland Department of Environment. If I did an inspection, certainly I would go out and look at it, and if I felt there was some concerns, I would immediately notify the developer, and then if warranted, also notify the Maryland Department of Environment.
Okay. Is that, I know that doesn't,
Well, I don't know if anyone has taken a look at actually where the signs are versus where the stream is, and so I think
I apologize. I'm not following you with, the signs shouldn't have anything to do with the stream. They have everything to do with forest conservation, not the stream. So I'm not sure what
I thought it was the 25-foot buffer on the wetlands.
No. The signs that you're seeing are forest conservation signs that are required along the limits of a forest retention easement, which is an easement that is recorded in the Harford County Land Records on a plat. Unless it's something I'm not aware of, which is not a regulatory requirement of the city or the state, there are no signs related to the 25-foot state wetland buffer that I'm aware of that are required. I don't think there's anything out there other than forest conservation.
so you're saying there's a difference between the stream buffer and the forest conservation?
That's correct. The two aren't the same, although they may overlap, and oftentimes they do overlap because forest that's in an easement or in a buffer area, naturally you're 99% of the time not going to touch that unless you're putting infrastructure in where you have to cross a wetland or stream. So the majority of the time that goes into a forest retention easement over top the buffer. So it's almost like having two easements there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
We've still got more questions in the audience.
I'm sorry, you have a question of him?
There's people out there still,
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize more still.
like 4 of them.
My name's Mike Colby, and I actually live in Bully Rock. I want to ask Mr. Graham, who's responsible for the maintenance of that access road if it gets put in?
The maintenance of the access road would be the responsibility of the HOA, and it would be stipulated in the HOA documents, which stipulate maintenance of all open space areas and stormwater management areas.
It's like the city of Havre de Grace is telling the HOA you got to have this, but yet we're going to be responsible for the maintenance of it. So I say no to it.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishes to speak? Yes.
Hi, I'm Jamie Price, and I live at 311 Willow Way, which is right here, the second home. So right behind my home will be the storm drain, and so that will be one of my issues is what's it visually going to look like a couple years from now, and I just want to make sure that, my children are safe and things like that. And then just above me is going to be also the, the rise of the house, and I just wanted to make sure that the water flow and like everything's going to look good behind my house, basically, is what I wanted to chat with everyone about, maybe.
Okay, we'll see if we can, is there someone here that can speak to the way that facility is designed and protected?
I kind of get how it's designed. Jess was showing me everything of how everything's going to go, but just, who's going to be responsible and who's going to make sure everything looks good behind me and safe for my children?
Okay, so looking good and being safe are two different things, and that's why I was saying, how would that thing be protected? Because that's where the child safety thing comes in.
Sure. I may defer to Mr. Ward and Company and his consultant on this, but to the best of my knowledge, the stormwater management facility will be designed in the format of a submerged gravel wetland. Is that correct, Mr. Mehta? So as I understand it, in this day and age, in engineering and looking at stormwater management, the preferred method is not to have what we call extended detention, meaning we do not prefer to have a volume of water in a pond. The method now, the submerged gravel wetlands, is to get the water in and get it infiltrated as much as possible, and also through a series of step pools and things like that. So there shouldn't be an extended period in this pond where it has 3, 4, 5 feet of water. As far as any fencing or anything like that, it's my understanding from talking to Tim Whitty, Director of Public Works, that this pond would not be required, based on requirements, to have a fence. That's usually dependent upon the slopes and the type of facility it is will dictate whether or not a fence is required. As far as maintenance and management of the stormwater facility, as I said previously with the last gentleman who got up, open space and stormwater management facilities are the responsibility of any HOA in a community. And the City of Havre de Grace has a stormwater management inspector who routinely inspects those facilities, and if there's any issues with the facility, whether it be trees growing up in the spillway or in the embankment that shouldn't be there, then that has to be addressed, and a note or a letter is sent to the HOA notifying them those issues with the facility. But again, this facility should not be an extended detention facility, and should infiltrate and go through a series of step pools and things like that, so that the water is hopefully infiltrated quickly.
So the HOA will maintain it now, so there won't be a fence. So who do I talk to possibly about getting a fence to protect my yard from my children going over there?
Well, that would be something that you'd have to speak with.
Let's first hear from the engineers about a better description of what that unfenced facility looks like. Is anyone here that can speak to that?
Yes, I'm Jeff Mathai with MRA. Right now, we don't have approved plans. It's a concept. We're considering a gravel wetland, which is basically just gravel that's about even with the groundwater, and it'll have plantings in it. And if it has a slope, it's steeper than 3-to-1, we probably will fence it. But again, it's not designed yet, so we can't say for sure, but it probably would be fenced. And it's a flat gravel.
Could you speak into the mic, Jeff, please?
Sorry. It'll also have plantings on the bottom of it, so it won't look like a typical pond, but it's an ESD facility.
Jeff, wait till he calls on.
Okay.
It's hard to describe. I'm sorry.
Understand, because you haven't designed it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like Shane said, it's something that's going to sit close to groundwater. It kind of is designed to, it's required by Maryland Department of Environment. It's part of their ESD stormwater management requirements. It most likely will have a fence.
You know when we might have plans for that?
We need to do the engine, it'll probably be 6 months.
Thank you, sir. Did you have any other
I'm
thing?
good after that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have questions of her? No? Anyone else here that would like to speak to the commission? Have we run through everybody? Okay. Okay, at this time, I think it's time for the commissioners to have a discussion among themselves. And from all you've heard from the neighbors and from the applicant, what concerns you might have, what things that you might think we ought to visit.
I just have a few clarifications I can make here.
Sure, go ahead.
On when Willow Way was approved, it was part of the overall development there, but it was approved later in the process. And it was designed as a through street over to the Bully Rock property. The owner of Bully Rock, there was a gentleman named Ed Abel, which was the original developer. He said, no way, we're going to be a private gated community. So that's why there's no cul-de-sac at the end of that, because it was built right up to the property line to continue over. So that's always been a plan, to have that as a through street. And as far as an emergency access goes, there's one way into that portion of Bully Rock, and that's at the clubhouse. So if something happens at that end and it blocks off access, you need a place for people to get in and out. Currently, there are at least 3 other emergency access roads in Haverty Grace. There was one at Hall Court, which was just a gravel road that went from Lewis Lane into Hall Court, and it had a cable across there. And the fire department actually used that a few times to get into the lower half of that development. And after they built the firehouse up on the hill, there was no longer a need for that, because the rest of the development was finished out. There's one over in Greenway Farms. There's actually 2 of them in Greenway Farms to get to different properties back there. As far as your view corridor from your side yard to the development, there's no requirement for that. That's up to the homeowner. If you want to plant trees to block the view, that's up to you. My question is, do you have trees on your other side to block your neighbors from seeing into your property? So I don't see any requirement for us to put a thing there. Maintenance always falls back on the homeowners association. That's all. It's always been there. It was always planned that it would be an emergency access from the beginning of when Bully Rock was first discussed. I was on the planning commission back then. You know, I've only been back on this for a couple weeks now, but I was a member when Bully Rock was first brought into the city. And anybody doesn't know what a Knox box is, if you go around and look at a commercial building, there's usually a little box sitting by the front door with the key thing there. So in the event there's an emergency, there's a key to that building that the fire department can contact communications. They can push a button that sends a code and it unlocks that, and that allows them to get to the key. The key is a special design key. You can't go to the local hardware store and get one and make a copy for anybody. It's kind of like a safe deposit box key, you know, there's only one. So that's all I have right now.
Thank you.
So I just want to say, we talked about this. I mean, 2015, has it been that long ago? And one of the things that I remember about it was, and we've done a lot of things since then, so I don't remember everything, but, you know, and I'm not here to consider testimony from people that aren't here, so I don't know. And one person can't decide what's needed and what's not. But the interesting thing was I do remember that the location of the access was in such a way, and it was requested that it wouldn't be at the end of the man's driveway. And it looks like that, you know, that has been addressed on this plan. What I found interesting, and I think I was rather new on the commission then, was, you know, some of the things that we were actually asking for, because I wasn't used to that. And I think one of the things that you did was you pushed for the berm to be there, one, as sort of a visual buffer. And I think that, you know, because they said the landscaping plan and stuff isn't done yet, of course, but, you know, one of the things that we did talk about was not only the berm, but you asked about the potential of, you know, trees. And I think at that time, of course, the developer was very amicable to that, and they weren't talking about planting a full forest, but they were planning, there's going to be plantings in the landscaping aspect of it. And that's what I remember. So it looks like, aside from whether there's going to be trees on the landscaping plan, is that, everything else that the Planning Commission suggested back then, before the plan expired, that the developer has taken into consideration, and I believe in the attempt to be a good neighbor. That said, there's a couple other things that, to talk about, is that, one of the things that we seem to run into here a lot is that, it's okay to cut down the trees to build your property, but then when the neighbors want to cut down their trees to build their property, people get upset about that, and it's sad. I mean, I'm sure we'd like to keep as many as possible, but, I don't think it's in our purview to tell them how many trees or whatever they can cut down. And then the last thing about stormwater, I'm one of the hugest stormwater fans, not maybe. Anyhow, I know that one thing's for sure, they have to design it and it has to be approved to all the applicable regulations as far as what the city has for their stormwater program and for MDE and the Soil Conservation District. So one thing's for sure, whatever they do put there will be in compliance or they will not get their permits. So, they'll either be forced to build a fence or they won't need to build a fence, but I think that's an extra cost that they would only do if their permit required it. And that's not our purview either. So that's what I got.
Thank you. Mr. Graham, the plan that expired, 3 years ago?
Actually, I think it expired in 18, because 17 was the last one-year extension. So
Who was the applicant at that time? Was it a different applicant?
yes, it would have been MTBR at that time.
Okay. This is all starting to come back to me as we've gotten into this discussion. Right. And I do remember personally leading a discussion to put those berms in and to shift that lane and to do some planting of trees along the berms. Now, as I recall, we actually put that in as a requirement at that time for that plan that has now expired. And it was acceptable. We didn't get any pushback from the developer. He said, I'd be glad to do that. And I also, someone can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I also limited the tree planting to just the bermed areas, just the berms, not the whole entire length of the abutting subdivisions, but just the bermed section. And the reason for it was because right up in that area, you had the fronts of houses looking across there, not the backs of houses. Along the entire rest of this stretch, you've got the backs of neighborhoods facing each other like you do in the rest of the world. But here was kind of an unusual situation because we were affecting people's front yards. And that's why we limited the tree growth to the berm. I'm going to recommend to the commissioners that we keep that alive, keep that in place, and require this developer to put plantings in there. Now, how we go about specifying those plantings, we're not at liberty to write those specs sitting here on the dais tonight as to what caliper trees, how close to put them, what species, all that kind of stuff, and whether or not to stagger them or whether just to put a line right on top of the berm, which I think would look ridiculous. I think it should look as natural as possible and should be a mixture of species. How would you suggest if we, as a foursome here, want to implement that, how would you suggest that we leave it up to the department to write the spec?
Well, I may have a different philosophy than those in the past during the 2015 plan. Well, number one, we have landscaping guidance now. The city council adopted a landscaping ordinance a couple weeks ago, which we didn't have in the city at all. We still do not have specific buffer yard requirements. I guess the second part of it is I'm trying to think of the best way to put this, is that I think you always have to be careful as a planning commission in implementing or requiring conditions that are unrelated to city code requirements that don't exist. So if we're trying to create a buffer yard there in the absence of any buffer yard requirements in the city code, I think that's can be a slippery slope of exacting something out of a developer that isn't required as part of the city code. Do I have any objection with planting that berm? It doesn't matter to me if that's what they want to do, but I think it's something that being within having a new developer and home builder here, I think that's something that maybe you should be addressing directly with the builder to see if they would be amenable to a condition like that, agreeable to a condition rather than forcing it.
The city code does not have anything in it that requires this emergency connection either. And the whole reason for treating this in this fashion is because that thing exists.
I would disagree. I think the new subdivision regulations talk about emergency access and things like that. So, and that emergency access has been long been understood to go there long before this meeting. Right. So, I think it's a different circumstance with the emergency access.
Can I
Yes.
jump in? So, I agree with exactly what you're saying about I don't want to start down the slope of deciding where trees go. But I think one of the things that we do well here as a planning commission is we look at, for consistency's sake, the hardship and the outliers and whatever. So I would say, and no disrespect to anybody who might live there, is that, a large portion of these that are adjacent properties, I got no issue, okay? But there is an issue here where there are like two properties in particular that this might create that condition of a hardship where, we're about maybe to approve a site plan that would not be favorable to two people on Willow Way or something. So for me, again, normally I would be like, I agree with you, Shane. I'm just talking about two properties here, essentially, is the way I'm looking at it. So
I'm probably thinking more like 4, but it's those properties that curve around right at the end.
I'm just suggesting that if you're going to place a condition on it regarding landscaping, you make sure that it's worded in such a way that it has a rational basis to tie it to that provision or that condition.
Is anyone here from the developer that has the authority to speak with us about this?
Yeah, it's Bob Ward. And yeah, we're talking in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 properties. We can do something, to help with the neighborhood, to be a good neighbor. We'd be happy to do that. I can't design it with you here tonight, but I'm happy to.
We understand that.
Shane on something that I think would be acceptable to the folks here.
I would suggest that Mr. Ward's consultants are currently working on the landscaping plan now, and that if they choose to put something on the landscaping plan in that area, then I'm happy to take a look at it, discuss it with the neighbors and show them. Certainly, it's freely accessible material, and I have been providing material to the citizens that have requested it. So,
I think one of the gentlemen said that this is still a concept.
A concept?
the stormwater is still concept.
Okay,
Yeah.
but the site plan is approved.
No, you have to act on the site plan tonight to approve it.
Okay.
Mr. Ward, would it be acceptable for us to request some tree plantings along that berm, and rather than using the term require?
That's fine with me.
Frankly, as a favor to the commission, I think this would be very important, to do this.
Yeah, that's fine with me. That's a small item in the scheme of things.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Is there any other open discussion regarding this case before we move to?
Mr. Ford, should we hash out that condition right now before we go on? The wording of that condition? To make sure that it's acceptable?
So before we put those words together, when we entertain the motion to approve or deny the site plan, it would be connected, that motion would be connected to the, what's the number here? The 15 conditions put forth by the Department of Planning and the 9 conditions put forth by the Department of Public Works that are attached, as well as a condition that's requested by the Planning Commission. And that's what we're going to word. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So here we go. Planning Commission requests that the entire raised berm portion that extends from both sides of the emergency access lane be planted with enough trees to provide a reasonable visual barrier as they grow within 10 years. And that the berm not be mowed. That way other things can grow in there.
I don't know that I don't know that I agree with that.
Yeah, it's up to Bully Rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Especially invasive management.
Yeah.
You'd likely have survivability issues with those trees.
Well, that's why I was trying to leave it up to the department to prepare the wording.
Well, that's why I'm saying, I started to put this together. The developer shall give consideration to planting landscaping along the berm to provide a visual barrier that will provide a visual barrier within 10 years.
Okay. Okay, so that would be Planning Commission request number 1.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other discussion?
Are we going to vote on that, or?
Right now, if there's no other discussion. All right, do I hear a motion that regarding this subdivision approval?
I'm not in favor of it, so,
You're not in favor of approving the entire plan?
I'm not in favor of putting a requirement on the property owner to plant something there that no one knows how it's going to be maintained. And I have a question that maybe one of the developers here could answer. Your drawing shows...
Jim, could you pull your mic closer, please?
Yes, sorry. Your drawing shows the rear lot line of the proposed lots, and then there's about a 20-foot, my best guess, without having a scale, between the backyard rear line and the edge of the property. Is that all going to be cleared and leveled before you start construction, or some of that where this proposed berm is going to be? Is that going to stay, or are you grading everything down to level and then putting it back?
Who would like to speak to that? If whoever would like to speak, if you just step up to the mic for.
Step up to the mic, please.
Robert Holwick with Bully Rock Investments. It's still in the design, but that 20-foot roughly area is a swell to keep the stormwater off the Willow Way folks. So typically, we would go out, stake out the perimeter property line every 50 feet before any clearing, and then the LOD look to see how far back to that property line needs to go. And we would reach out to the homeowners if a tree is crossing the property line. Generally, there's encroachments, and right now there's a lot of encroachments onto our parcel from the Willow Way homeowners. So we would identify that property line, and so the sediment control plan would be the LOD for your limits of disturbance. But to get that swell in there, we likely would get pretty close to the, if not to the property line.
Okay.
And to build a swale, you have to take out the trees. Yeah. Okay, so if, I think we need to divide this into two votes then. The first vote would be a vote to add the Planning Commission's request. And who would like to move to either do it or to eliminate it?
I think it's going to die with lack of a second. So no one seconded the motion. So I think you just move on to the.
Wait a minute, was your previous thing a motion just for that?
No, I didn't make a motion at all.
There hasn't been a motion, so somebody either has to make a motion to approve or deny, and then we need a second.
So just so I understand, we're making that motion just so Mr. Ward could look into it.
No, we're making the motion for the Planning Commission to request that the berm be landscaped, trees.
But the onus is on the developer.
The who?
The developer would look into it, right?
No, nothing about looking into it. The motion would be what he just wrote, and that would be to request that the developer landscape the berm with trees.
Okay, so,
Is that correct, Mr.?
That's correct. So I'll suggest this. I will read what I wrote again.
Okay.
And then someone should make a motion
To either
approve or deny, and then we'll need a second on that. So what I wrote was, the developer shall give consideration to planting landscaping along the berm that will provide a visual barrier within 10 years. That is the motion under, or that is the topic under consideration for a motion.
Discussion?
Well, you got to move first, and then we discuss, unless you want to discuss before the motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve what Sean just said. Shane, excuse me.
I answered either or, Jim. My brother's Sean, so it's not a big deal.
Okay. Let me just make a note here for. All right, Mr. Miller's moved. Anybody second?
I'll second that.
All right, now discussion on the motion.
All right, thank you. I think that, Shane, I like the way you wrote that because the word is consider. It's not binding.
Right.
We're not making them do it. We're making them think about it. And again, one of the things that we've come to see through the other actions is that the developer has been amicable and a good neighbor. So I don't have a problem with the word consider. I probably would if we were mandating it for site plan approval, but just asking somebody to think about it, I don't think I have an issue with it.
Or if it was a different developer.
I don't
Some of them would just look at you and,
We've had more conversations with Mr. Ward and his company in the last 6 to 8 months than I think the city has had with the previous developer in years. So Mr. Ward and team have been very open, forthcoming, and so I have no reason to believe that they won't do their best to try to make everybody happy.
So what I'm saying is if we were mandating it, I probably couldn't go along with that, but, with the word consider, I think that's a good way to
okay,
do it.
we got a motion and a second, and any other discussion? So I'll call the roll. Mrs. Shaw,
Yes.
Harry Miller,
Yes.
Harry Miller,
Sorry, one of them.
Jim Miller,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. So that will be added to the main.
Yes, sir. I will issue, I should say, once you move, your next motion will be to approve the subdivision and site plans. And should you approve those, then that condition will be added into the conditions that were part of the staff report and noted in a letter to the developer.
Okay, do I hear a motion that, now we're already voting, so we can't go back to the public, unfortunately.
Right.
Do I hear a motion that we approve or deny the site plan and
subdivision?
I'll make a motion that we approve the site plan as presented.
And site and subdivision plan with
Yes.
the 15 conditions of the Department of Planning and the 9 conditions of the Department of Public Works. That's the way the motion should go, and the request of the Planning Commission.
Okay, I'll include all that in there.
You want me to restate that? For the
Yeah,
record?
please restate the motion.
Okay. So I'm using first names because we've got 2 Mr. Millers here. So Mr. Jim Miller moves that we approve the site and subdivision plan for parcel P to include the 15 conditions put forth by the Department of Planning in their staff report, and the 9 conditions put forth by the Department of Public Works in the staff report, and the single request by the Planning Commission put forth tonight. Do I hear a second?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Harry Miller.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Mrs. Shaw.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Miller.
Yes.
The site subdivision plan is approved as presented tonight. Thank you very much. And this doesn't go to any Board of Appeals or anything. This is it.
No, sir, there are no variances or conditional uses.
Right. You all have been very patient, and thank you so much for everyone, especially the members of the neighborhoods that have appeared in front of us. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned unless anybody has any further business.